From real ID deadlines to digital passports and facial recognition that feels straight out of a sci-fi movie, flying in 2026 is nothing like it used to be. And here's what nobody's telling you. If you show up to the airport with the wrong ID, you could face delays, surprise fees, or worst-case scenario, you won't even be allowed to board your flight. The crazy part? Most travelers have no idea these changes even exist until it's too late. So today, I'm breaking down every single new airport rule you absolutely need to know in 2026. Trust me, these changes are going to affect how you travel forever. I'm John from Dream Visa Updates, and let's dive in. All right, first things first, let's talk about Real ID because this one's catching people off guard left and right. Real ID is a federal security standard for the IDs you use at TSA checkpoints. And if you're planning to fly domestically using your driver's license, listen up because this affects you directly. You can no longer walk through security with just any old driver's license. It has to meet specific federal standards. And get this, you definitely cannot use an expired license anymore like you could before May 2025. I know, right? It's actually wild when you think about it. Just a couple years ago, we could literally fly with an expired license for domestic flights. Those days are gone forever. Now your license must be current and Real ID compliant. Here's how you check. Look for a star in the top corner of your license. Depending on what state you're in, it might be gold, black, or sitting inside a circle. If you see that star, you're good to go. Your license meets the Real ID requirements. But what if your license doesn't have that star? Don't panic. You've got options. TSA accepts several other forms of identification. A U.S. passport works perfectly. So does a passport card, an enhanced driver's license, a global entry card, your military ID, or a Nexus card. Now, I always recommend double-checking TSA's official website for the complete updated list of acceptable IDs, just to be absolutely sure you're bringing something that'll get you through security without any drama. Here's something super important that confuses a lot of people. Real ID does not affect international travel at all. If you're flying outside the United States, you need a passport. Period. That rule hasn't changed one bit. So let me simplify this for you. If you have a valid passport, you already meet every single ID requirement TSA has, whether you're flying domestic or international. If you're using a driver's license for a domestic flight, just make sure it's Real ID compliant and not expired. Otherwise, grab another ID from TSA's approved list. Think of Real ID as TSA basically saying, we need to see an ID that meets federal security standards before you can go through our checkpoint. Your passport already meets those standards, which is exactly why nothing changed for passport holders. Now let's get into digital IDs because this is where things get really interesting and honestly pretty confusing for most travelers. When people hear the term digital ID, they're actually talking about two completely different things. First, you've got mobile driver's licenses that let you store a digital version of your ID right on your phone. Second, there are programs that store your passport information digitally, and the media loves calling these digital passports. Both of these fall under the umbrella of digital identity, but here's the thing, they are not the same, and they definitely don't work the same way. Let's start with mobile driver's licenses. Some states now let you add a digital version of your Real ID compliant license to your phone using Apple Wallet, Google Wallet, or a state-approved app. At certain TSA checkpoints in certain airports, you can actually use this digital ID instead of handing over your physical card. Sounds convenient, right? But here's what you need to know. This is completely optional, and it only works in very specific places. Not every airport supports digital IDs. Not every TSA lane in those airports has the right equipment to read them. And even if they do have the equipment, TSA officers can still ask to see your physical ID anyway. If your phone dies, if the app glitches, if anything goes wrong, you absolutely need your physical license to get through security. Think of digital ID as a convenient shortcut, but not as a full replacement. You still need to carry that physical ID with you. Trust me on this one. Now let's clear up all the confusion around digital passports because this is causing major misunderstandings. When news outlets talk about digital passports, they're usually referring to programs that store your passport information electronically to make things like check-in or TSA screening move faster. Sometimes these programs use facial recognition to match your face to the passport photo on file. But, and this is crucial, this does not mean you can hop on an international flight without your physical passport. You absolutely cannot. Your physical passport is still the legal document that countries use to admit you, deny you entry, or record when you arrived and when you left. Every single international border on the planet still requires that physical booklet. No app, no stored data, nothing can replace it. At least not yet, digital passport programs are designed to make the airport process smoother and more efficient. They can help you zoom through TSA or boarding lines way faster, but they do not change what's legally required at the border. So let me make this crystal clear. Digital IDs on your phone can sometimes replace your physical license at TSA, but nothing, and I mean nothing, replaces your physical passport when you're flying internationally. Drop a comment below and let me know what form of ID you'll be traveling with next time you fly. Personally, I will always have my physical passport with me because whether I'm taking an international flight or just a domestic one, I know it's going to work everywhere, every time. No questions asked. All right, now we need to talk about a new fee that's catching travelers completely off guard. Starting February 1st, 2026, TSA launched a $45 identity verification fee for anyone who shows up at the security checkpoint without any acceptable form of ID. Let that sink in. $45. This fee kicks in if you show up with no real ID-compliant driver's license, no passport or passport card, no global entry, no nexus, no Sentry, no other TSA-accepted ID, and no working digital ID that TSA can actually accept at that specific checkpoint. Basically, it applies when TSA has absolutely no way to verify your identity through their standard process. Now here's an important detail. If you have a digital ID on your phone and you arrive at a TSA lane that supports digital ID and your phone is working properly, that counts as acceptable ID. In that situation, you won't pay the $45 fee, but here's where it gets tricky. If that airport doesn't support digital ID, or that specific TSA lane doesn't have the right equipment, or your phone battery is dead, or the system isn't working right, or TSA asks for a physical backup and you don't have one, then TSA treats that as arriving without acceptable ID. This is exactly why TSA still strongly recommends carrying a physical ID even if you're planning to use a digital one. And that's where the new $45 Confirm ID process comes into play. Nobody wants to deal with this. It sounds tedious, and $45 is $45, but it's probably better than missing your flight entirely. Here's how it works. If you arrive at security without an acceptable ID, TSA will pull you out of the normal line and charge you that $45 fee on the spot. Then you go through a separate identity verification process called Confirm ID, where they check your information against government databases to confirm who you are. The $45 fee is non-refundable, and it covers identity verification for up to 10 days, which means depending on how long your trip is, it might apply to both legs of your round-trip flight. In many cases, thanks to Confirm ID, you'll still be able to get through the airport and take your flight even without an acceptable form of ID on you. But I would not recommend relying on this, and TSA definitely does not recommend relying on this either. Paying this fee and going through the Confirm ID process is a backup option, not a plan. Think of it as TSA saying, we can verify your identity if something goes seriously wrong, but it's going to cost you time and money. TSA is very clear that showing up without valid ID will cause major delays, and if you're cutting it close to your departure time, it could put your entire trip at risk. The smart move? Always bring a real ID compliant driver's license, a passport card, or another TSA-accepted physical ID, even if you're planning to use digital ID. Digital IDs can absolutely speed things up at the airport, but they should never, ever be your only option. New rules and fees like this are popping up constantly. That's why, in addition to breaking them down for you in these weekly videos, I also share all these updates in my free weekly newsletter. You can sign up with the link down in the description. Now let's talk about biometrics and facial recognition, because this is where things get a little freaky, honestly. Biometrics is the broader system that uses your physical traits to verify your identity. Facial recognition is one specific type of biometric technology that uses your face. In some cases, you're never even asked to show your digital or physical ID. Instead, you end up using your face as your boarding pass. Wild, right? This has caused a ton of confusion, not to mention serious privacy concerns. Travelers are worried they're being tracked or monitored, and many passengers have no clue that in most situations, they actually have the option to opt out completely. Here's what facial recognition at airports is actually doing. It's comparing your live face to a photo that's already on file somewhere. It might compare your face to your passport photo, your driver's license photo, or your airline passenger record. That's it. That's all it does. Now, here's what facial recognition technology is not doing, and this is important. Thankfully, it is not reading your emotions. It is not pulling information from your social media accounts. It is not tracking your movements as you walk through the airport. And it is not storing your facial data for long-term surveillance. It's simply a faster, more efficient way to verify that you are who your ID says you are. According to the official Transportation Security Administration website, facial recognition at TSA security checkpoints is completely optional for U.S. citizens. You can always request a manual ID check instead if you'd rather not use facial recognition. And TSA officers are specifically trained to accommodate travelers who choose not to participate in biometric screening. If an airline uses facial recognition for boarding or bag drop, you can typically ask to show your documents the traditional way instead. The technology is designed to speed things up for people who want to use it, not to force anyone into a system they're uncomfortable with. So when you put all of this together, here's what actually happens when you show up at the airport in 2026. Nothing new has completely replaced what came before. TSA and airports have simply added new tools on top of the existing system, and that layering, that's what's confusing travelers. At security, TSA is still doing the exact same core job it always has, confirming who you are and making sure you're allowed to fly. That foundation hasn't changed one bit. A valid passport, a real ID-compliant driver's license, or another TSA-approved physical ID still gets you through without any issues. Digital IDs, facial recognition, and biometric programs, those are optional shortcuts. When they're available and working properly, they can speed things up significantly. When they aren't, TSA simply falls back to the standard process. That's exactly why carrying a physical ID still matters, and why I will personally always have my passport with me, no matter what. If you arrive with a valid passport or a real ID-compliant license, most of these changes won't even feel dramatic at all. You'll move through security just like you always have, possibly a little faster if you choose to use digital ID or facial recognition. Where people run into serious trouble is assuming something has been completely replaced when it hasn't. Digital IDs can sometimes replace showing your physical license at TSA, but they don't eliminate the need to carry one. Digital passports can speed things up, but they don't replace your physical passport at international borders. And the Confirm ID process is a costly backup for emergencies, not something you should ever plan to rely on. Here's a charitable way to think about all of this. Airports are actually adding options for us, not taking away any of the previous requirements. If you bring the right physical ID, everything else becomes optional convenience. These systems are designed to make travel faster and smoother, not to take away your choices. Your passport works everywhere and covers every single step. Real ID rules apply to driver's licenses, not passports. Digital IDs can help speed things up, but always have a physical backup. The new TSA fee only applies if you arrive with no acceptable ID at all. And for U.S. citizens, facial recognition is optional at most checkpoints. If you found this helpful, you definitely want to join my free weekly newsletter where I break down these updates as they happen, so nothing catches you off guard at the airport. And make sure to watch this video next, where I explain the other new airport and airline rules you need to know about. I'll put it on the screen now and link it down in the description. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join me back here for more travel tips and hacks each week. I'm John from Dream Visa Updates, and I'll see you in that next video soon. Safe travels!